Alright, so hello one and all, welcome back to another Mushoku Tensei video where I'll be going over the anime, manga, and light novel, discussing everything that the anime skipped because there is a lot. And so let's start off with talking about the anime with episode 11, Children and Warriors. The episode starts off with the 6-month time skip after Roxy finds her way to Fidoa, only to see that it's been destroyed in the teleportation incident. Now, I've already gone over this scene back in my episode 8 review, where the manga and light novel has already discussed it, so if you'd like you can go check that out, but I will say that the scene here is a lot more condensed compared to the light novel and the manga. Although there are differences between the light novel and manga versions of this scene, the anime kind of combines the two together, just with less content in it. But to sum it up, Roxy found Fidoa to be an empty wasteland and checks the board to the dead to find none of the Greyrats on it, thankfully. But then she sees the note written by Paul. Before she gets the chance to read it, however, a dwarf and an elf standing behind her speak up, commenting on how Paul is still alive. Unfortunately. This is Talon and Alenalize. They were in Fangs of the Black Wolf along with Paul and Zenith and someone else. This is the start of their adventure, but that's for another day. During the opening credits, we hear Paul's letter, which again, I've already went into detail before, but TLDR, he and Norn are safe in Millis while he's searching for Lilia, Aisha, and Zenith. But during the credits, we get to see Dead End walking around town, fighting monsters, and we see Eris buy the headband that they now sport, and then we cut to Dead End after they've accepted a job that requires them to investigate some strange monster in the Petrified Forest. The job itself will give them 5 scrap iron coins for investigating it, but if they slay it, they'll get 2 iron coins. Eris, enthralled by the mystery, is excited to see what kind of monsters they find. And after crossing a barren field, they find themselves in a barren forest. Quite the difference in scenery, right? As they enter the forest, though, they see the Tokobaro toughs getting pushed around by some pig guy and his party, telling them to back off. As it turns out, all 3 of their parties were under the same quest. The 3 parties discuss the situation for a moment before deciding just to ignore each other and go off in their separate ways. And as everybody runs off, Rudeus is worried about the Tokorabu toughs kids and says that they should help them. However, Rudeus doesn't think that's a good idea since Rudeus's identity as a Superd could be found out. But with a little bit of arguing, Rudeus convinces Rudeus to help them and says that they'll trail them only to help them if the situation calls for it. And they both accept those conditions, but Eris is annoyed because she wanted to fight something strong instead of just trailing these kids. And then a little bit later, a giant spider monster jumps down from the trees and Rudeus is ready to jump in to help the kids, but Rudeus tells them to wait. Just then, an even bigger black and blue snake monster cuts them off and is on the offense against the Tokorabu toughs. Rudeus doesn't want to jump in just yet because he wants it to get really desperate so then when they do help, the kids are more appreciative of the rescue and that'll boost their reputation even more. And if they get hurt a little bit, he'll just heal them with his magic. It's that simple. The plan is perfect. And just then, Gablin, or rather his upper body, is thrown through the air, slamming against a tree before hitting the ground with a cold thud. And then in response, Rudeus and Eris run in and kill the spider and snake respectively. Rudeus is obviously angry and questions why Rudeus stopped him from stepping in, and Eris doesn't even try to stop Rudeus' frustration this time, unlike what she did before. She's not on Rudeus' side right now. But Rudeus tells the truth and then he gets slammed against a tree as Rudeus cuts him off. Kurt then runs in and says that it's their fault that their friend died, but Rudeus claims that it's never a child's fault. But then Kurt retorts and says that they aren't children, they're adventurers. They knew the risks of what could happen, and Rudeus is about to pat Kurt on the head but goes for a shoulder pat instead. He apologizes for treating them like a child and he should have treated them like a warrior. They part ways with the Tokorabu toughs and Eris wishes them good luck. And just then they hear fighting in the distance. They charge in for where the sounds are coming from to see the other party being torn apart by a giant red snake that dwarfs the other snake that they fought in comparison. This monster is known as the Red Hood Cobra, and Rudeus says that they can beat the thing, and without hesitation this time, Rudeus steps in to save these guys. Firing what looks to be like a fire-infused stone cannon, the Cobra, despite its massive size, kind of just dodges the cannon perfectly and just like maneuvers him, kind of like JonTron. But Rudeus then runs up and slides down the Cobra, cutting it open on his way down with his spear, with ease, and after him Eris jumps in an attempt to cut the Cobra but can't even scratch its scales. She gets sent flying by its tail but manages to land safely, and Rudeus tries to hit it again but it just keeps dodging his bullets. But just then, before Rudeus is about to take in a head-on attack from the snake, Rudeus steps in and with one hand just holds the snake in place. It's kind of badass. And now, with more power, Eris jumps up and slices the Cobra clean in half. And the move that she used reminds me of the one that she did with Ghislaine that one time during their training. But in pain, the Cobra launches its head up and Rudeus fires a third stone cannon, piercing its chest, killing it instantly. Making sure they've actually won, Eris kind of like taps the snake's skin before celebrating, and Rudeus thanks Rudeus but is cut off when he says that they were too late. The others are already dead. And so during a depressing walk back to the Adventurers Guild, Nokopara chats them up and asks them what the rush was to see Jalil and Vizquel. Rudeus then finds the two of them huddling together in an alleyway as Nokopara says that he figured that they traded jobs. And so he says that if he lets the guild know about this, they'll both lose their license. Nokopara then demands half of what they earn every month from now on, and Rudeus curses Hitogami because ever since they arrived at this city, everything has just gone wrong and it's all because of him. Eris reaches her hand out, worried about Rudeus as he takes it, and he reassures her that everything will be fine. He will do anything to bring her home, even wipe out this whole city off the map, even if it meant betraying Rudeus. And just then, a splash of water hit the ground. Nokopara steps backwards and trips over his feet, landing on his butt, and screams, "Dead end!" And just then, seeing Rudeus with his emerald green hair, everybody starts to run away in panic. Rudeus picks Nokopara up by the neck and says that they are leaving the city. If he finds that their license has been revoked, he will come back and kill him. Passing out, Nokopara drops to the ground as the guards start running in. Rudeus jumps away and leaves their sight, and looking around, Rudeus notices the remainder of the Tokurabu toughs as they ask why they're so scared of him since he just saved their lives. But now outside of the city, Eris and Rudeus start to call out and try and find Rudeus, and after a moment they find him and they apologize to each other. Rudeus says that he's selfish, but Rudeus is sorry because he didn't realize how much Rudeus was really worrying about. Feeling Rudeus's resolve when he was ready to kill Nokopara, he realized that he was just desperate to protect something. Eris. Having something you want to protect makes you a warrior. Rudeus asks Rudeus what it meant to be a warrior to him, and he says that it's his pride. Warriors protect their children and treasure their comrades. He is a warrior, and even if Rudeus can't protect his good name, he will still protect him. The two of them shake on their new resolve to protect and help one another, and feeling left out, Eris kind of joins in and slaps her hand on top. Rudeus thinks to himself, though, that he doesn't really understand what Rudeus meant by pride. How does pride make you a warrior? But Rudeus' approval definitely made Rudeus happy, regardless. And then we cut to the next day as we see a shiny-headed Rudeus and Eris compliments him on it, and Rudeus gives Rudeus the band that they have to cover up the gem, and Eris cheers and is happy that the three of them match now. Rudeus realizes that he's been trying to take everything on by himself, and that's why he fails. He says that they'll hold strategy meetings to understand where the other is coming from and to form plans to benefit them all. And so the end credits gives us a compilation of them traveling through the demon continent, when they cook food, when they ride a big lizard thing, when they train, bathe, well, try to watch them bathe, and then they finally made their way to Windport. And so this is the end of the first half of Season 1, or aka, this is Season 1 and we're moving on to Part 2, but if you said that you were incorrect, but you might as well be correct because it's a separation, in this, it's a different title, so it's whatever. We're going on to the next course soon. And so that was a hell of a first half of a season. That's a hell of a first 11 episodes, that's for sure. Very exciting stuff, but this isn't the end because we still have to go over the manga. So as Dead End enters the forest, we see the two parties fighting again. Kurt, the leader of the D-rank team Tokurabu Toughs, is arguing with Blaze, the leader of the B-rank team Super Blaze. Very original team name there. As the party split up, Rudeus tells Rudeus to follow the Tokurabu Toughs because they'd be too weak to face off against the monsters in the forest. And sure enough, monsters show up, although they're a bit different compared to in the anime. An executioner who's basically like a kind of a large lizard man in a knight's armor and sword, alongside an almond anaconda, which is just a big ol' snake. And so thanks to Rudeus' hesitation, sliced by the executioner, Goblin gets cut in half. Not horizontally like in the anime, but rather vertically. Dead End charges in and Rudeus tries to fire off a fireball, but the executioner dodges it. Using Quagmire, he stops it in his place and finishes with a blow to the head with another fireball. Meanwhile, Eris and Rudeus dealt with the almond anaconda before Rudeus starts yelling at Rudeus. Not understanding what Rudeus did wrong, he's like, why is this my fault? Why is it always my fault? He yells back at Rudeus asking why he's getting blamed for this, but Rudeus flat out says that it's just his fault. Just then, Kurt steps in and tells Rudeus to back off and says that they aren't children, but rather they're adventurers, and Rudeus then takes a step back and understands Rudeus' thought process. Rudeus explains that a warrior is someone who protects children and treasures their comrades, and is one who never loses their honor. That's what Rudeus was trying to do. He was trying to preserve their honor. That's why he didn't want to rush in and save them right away. That's what Rudeus got out of the situation anyway. In reality, we know the truth. He apologizes to Rudeus and says that he misunderstands, but Rudeus keeps thinking for him to just don't apologize. He realizes it is his fault. He is the enemy here. It's all Rudeus' fault, but then the past version of him speaks up. Well, he's completely misunderstanding the situation. Let's just use that to our advantage. As long as all is forgiven, who cares about what's lost? And with having these kinds of thoughts, Rudeus starts to hate himself. We kind of skip past the red-hooded cobra fight, but we find out that the Executioner and Almond Anaconda were both B-ranked monsters, while the red-hooded cobra is an A-rank monster. And it's stated that anything B-rank and above can dodge attacks easily and toy with their opponent. That's how, the Executioner was able to actually dodge Rudeus' attacks. But anyway, Dead End slayed the cobra, grabbed its corpse, and brought it back to the guild. And Rudeus actually says one of my favorite quotes from the series: "To think that in this world, such a day when nothing went right would come. I was so tired. All I wanted to do was go home and rest." I don't know why, but this kind of hit deep for me. I like it. It's depressing, and that's why I'm smiling about it. So after they return back to Rikurisu City, they have to deal with Nokopara's bullshit, and Rudeus thinks about killing Nokopara or pinning the blame all on Jalil, or even just abandoning Rudeus altogether. He's having some pretty awful thoughts, but he then settles on a plan that will harm the least amount of people. Within Dead End's party, anyway. Rudeus tells Rudeus that he's about to flood the entire city and kill Nokopara along with it, and all he asks is Rudeus to bring both he and Eris to safety. And as he tries to grab Rudeus' hand, Rudeus kind of pulls it away, revealing to the town that he is a supered. Rudeus threatens Nokopara, and the townsfolk, except for kind of Kurt really, all run away, and Rudeus jumps out of the town, saying that he can come right back in the town if he finds that their adventurer license has been revoked. Rudeus blames himself for what Rudeus just did. He took all of Rudeus' sins for him and got punished in his stead. And feeling frustrated with himself, nothing going right as he's been making every wrong choice, Rudeus starts to break down and cry in the middle of the streets. He pulls Eris with him as they escape the city, calling for Rudeus, and by the time they get out of the city, Rudeus loses all of his energy and is instead being pulled along by Eris. And upon seeing Rudeus runs over and gives him a hug as Rudeus apologizes to him. Rudeus is confused and he's like, no, I should be apologizing to you, not the other way around. But Rudeus, however, says that he thought that Rudeus was acting for selfish reasons, but rather, he's fighting to protect the one that he loves. But Rudeus just can't accept that. He may be good with words, but in reality, he's a coward that hides in a corner whenever something goes wrong. But as he thinks this, Rudeus interrupts his thought process and tells Rudeus to place him on the bottom of his list of priorities. But Rudeus argues that and says that he will restore the Super's reputation, no matter what. The two give a fist bump and Eris jumps in on it, and the next day Rudeus looks like a crownless Neptune as they make their way to the Windport. A passing salesman gave him a lift on his lizard transports, Eris started learning the demon god tongue, and thanks to Rudeus and Rudeus, she picked it up pretty well actually. And now Eris is far less stressed than she was before now that she can actually understand what's going on around her. And periodically they'd start to hold team strategy meetings to uphold 3 principles: report, contact, and consult. As they continued south and south some more, they finally reached their destination, the Demon Continent's port town, Windport. And so we kind of just got a little bit more internal dialogue from Rudeus and Rudeus, kind of just standard manga stuff. We get a lot more emotion out of it as well compared to the anime. Although I don't believe that Rudeus does cry like that in the light novel, but it is an interesting touch. I do kind of like that, just all the stress. He kind of almost has like a panic attack in a way. I don't know, I kind of like that. It's nice. But anyway, let's move on to the light novel. So the light novel starts off with Dead End after about a day's journey as they enter the Petrified Forest, which holds B-ranked monsters. such as the Executioner and the Almond Anaconda. Dead End then runs into Tokurabu Tufts and Super Blaze as they discuss the triple booking, and Rudeus says that Blaze, a pig man, reminded him of one of the front guards, but didn't know the race's name. However, he always just thought of them as orcs. And so it is just speculation, but it's possible that Blaze is an Ort, which is one of the names that we saw, like one of the job postings, one of the clients was listed as an Ort. And so, I don't know, I think that maybe because he's comparing it to Orc, maybe he is an Ort, I don't know. You know, there's a C and a T symbol. I don't know, maybe he's an Ort. Maybe that's what a pig man is called. But Blaze's job description was to slay the white fang cobras that appeared in the Petrified Forests. And Kurt's was to collect the mysterious eggs spotted in the Petrified Forest. And then Rudeus's, of course, was to locate an unknown monster. We put these things together and we get a kind of an understanding of what happened. White fang cobras, which aren't native to the Petrified Forest, showed up, started laying eggs, and now they have to be killed. But following the Tokurabu Tufts, they find themselves face to face with an executioner, which in the manga they portray the executioner as like this lizard monster, but in the light novel they're described basically as a zombie adventurer that still kept its armor and is still quite skilled. It kind of retains the knowledge of the adventurer that was killed. And so what's unfortunate is when an executioner dies, their equipment disintegrates along with it, meaning you don't even get any good drops from it. Meanwhile, the Tokurabu Tufts come face to face with some almond anacondas as well, and they're named after the almond pattern on their body. These things do, however, come in packs from 3 to 5 and have poisonous venom, so meaning that these two B-ranked monsters are some of the most dangerous ones to come across in the forest. And so after Gablin gets cut in half, Rudeus faces off against the Executioner, which he does manage to hit, unlike in the manga. However, due to his anxiety, he doesn't completely hit it dead on and accidentally only hits its arm, completely blowing it off. And so then he uses Quagmire to stop it in its tracks and creates a boulder above it, just crushing it. After that, they took Kurt and Bachiro to the edge of the forest with their friend on their backpack. Eris then tells them good luck, and despite not sharing the same language, Kurt understood, but in response, he grabbed her hand and gave it a kiss near the knuckle of the thumb, and Eris, panicked, tries to rub the kiss off of her hand and rubs it on her armor. And it wasn't even a direct kiss on the hand, but rather it was on the glove, and so she just threw it away into the forest to get rid of it. And then both Rudeus and Ruger are like, "What are you doing? That's a glove. We need, that's equipment. You don't just throw that away." But then Eris takes her hand and presents it in front of Rudeus, and then he just licks it for some reason. And then he gets decked in the face with a staple Boreas punch. And it nearly breaks his neck and almost leaves him unconscious. But Rudeus does see, however, Eris starts looking at the spot that Rudeus licked, and then she licks it herself before she rubs it off. Such a strange child. But Eris then apologizes and is like, "I'm sorry about that, but you can't just lick me, okay?" And so for as awful as the day went, things just got a little bit less worse with that. That was a fun interaction. But according to Ruger, a warrior must never harm a child and is obligated to protect children. A warrior must never forsake a comrade and protect his comrades. And soon they run into the A-ranked red-hooded cobra, which had already wiped out Super Blaze, the 6-member B-ranked party. And apparently, rarely a white fang cobra can mutate to become a red-hooded cobra, which explains the reports from the other requests. And then a quote that I like is, Ruger is like, "Shall we attack it?" Rudeus goes, "Is it okay for me to make the call?" And then he goes, "Yeah, who else would?" So Ruger still trusts Rudeus, which is really nice. But as it turns out, Ruger is not intimidated in the slightest by this monster. And since this one monster alone is able to wipe out an entire party of B-rank adventurers, I'm going to guess that Ruger is easily an S-rank warrior. And not even that it exists, but he's probably double S-rank, right? If that was a ranking that we could use. But Ruger's like, "Yeah, no, using our regular tactics to fight this thing should be no problem at all. It's not going to harm any of us." However, despite all of that, this monster was still A-ranked, and it was a formidable foe. And they're much more powerful, stronger, and agile than a white fang cobra. Their scales were very strong and resisted fire, and their fangs held a venomous poison. Rudeus then kicks off the fight with a slightly stronger stone cannon than he normally does, but the cobra just easily dodges it. And Ruger even jumps up and tries to go for its skull, but it even dodges his attack. I mean, not that Ruger's trying, but still. But going in for the rebound, Ruger's here, the cobra jumps up and it kind of goes back and tries to bite Rudeus, and he kind of just pushes it away with his spear. And so meanwhile, Eris goes from behind and strikes the tail with her sword, and barely able to break skin, or rather scale I guess, the Cobra focuses on her. That's basically how things went here. Rudeus and Rudeus would distract the Cobra and miss their attack and whatever, while Eris gets another hit in and slowly deals damage to it. And so eventually this tires out the Cobra and weakens it enough for Rudeus to land a hit with his stone cannon. And they grabbed any valuable parts of the Cobra from there, like its fangs, they skinned it, and they took any valuables from the remains of Super Blaze, burned all their bodies, and found and smashed the eggs. And then finally they went back to Rikarisu City. And yeah, there's a lot of cleanup when it comes to slaying monsters. But as they got back to the guild to turn in their quest, Nokopara stops both P Hunter and Dead End and was curious about how a pet could wind up outside of the city, and how there was a red-hooded cobra inside the city. So I guess Nokopara was keeping tabs on both parties, which meant the jig is up. Nokopara demands 2 silver coins a month, but Rudeus says that he doesn't have enough to pay him right now, but if he turns in the job for its money, then he will have enough. Nokopara, being kind of an idiot, lets Rudeus do this, and he gets Roman and Visquel to dissolve their party and makes them join Dead End. Returning to Nokopara, Rudeus asks if he has any proof that the two parties swap jobs. And then Nokopara then goes to the clerk and asks for the guild's record book and takes P Hunter and Dead End around the city to visit previous clients. First, they visited the old lady that Visquel exterminated the bugs for a little bit ago, and the lady thanks Dead End for doing that. And Nokopara, kind of shocked, tells Visquel to give them her adventurer card, and it says that their party is Dead End. Nokopara refuses to give up and goes over to like a dozen different clients, all of them attributing the job's completion to Dead End. However, as they made their way past the White Claw Inn, they run into Kurt, who he basically just spills the beans on everything. And he says how amazing Rudeus was back in the forest, and with Dead End supposedly being in the city all day dealing with pet jobs, things didn't line up. And so with all this, Rudeus thinks of a couple plans. 1, kill Nokopara. This was a bit of a dice roll on whether or not Nokopara actually did have companions, so things could end up pretty violently. 2, blame Jalil for everything, basically. This would probably get them out of the situation, but at the expense of Rudeus's trust, so that's not happening. Then there's 3, cough up money for now and find a way out later. This could work, but Nokopara could wind up trapping them in a scheme to keep them in the city and drain them of their money. But then again, there is always option number 4. Flood the city and kill everyone in it, Nokopara along with them. Rudeus' goal is to get Eris home safe no matter what, so even if he betrays Rudeus and Jalil, or if Eris ends up hating him, he's going to get her home no matter what, no matter how low he has to get. So charging up mana in his hands, Rudeus notices the look on Nokopara's face. Rudeus washed his hair from the blue dye and is showing his emerald green natural color. Everyone screams and runs away, including Jalil and Kurt. Eris asks what's happening, and Rudeus says they are in the worst case scenario right now. And then Eris goes like, so why aren't you doing anything about it? And Rudeus says, because there is nothing I can do. Sorry. And then Eris goes like, oh, well, there's nothing you can do about it then. We're out of luck. I love how just as matter-of-factly Eris is. It's so funny. But after that, Rudeus threatened Nokopara and fled the city, taking the entirety of the blame on himself. As Eris and Rudeus packed up their things, they left the inn and found Kurt. They told him that Rudeus wasn't a bad guy, and in return for saving their lives, Kurt is to spread good word about Rudeus. Heading to the Adventurers Guild, he removes Jalil and Visquel's name from their party and tells the clerk to pass on an I'm sorry message to them. Rudeus purchases a lizard mount and heads off. After leaving the city, Rudeus yells at the guards and says that Rudeus was in their city for 2 whole months and nothing bad happened. So I guess 2 months passed. We're probably in the summer of, I believe, K417 if I remember. But in the fields, Eris screams Rudeus' name, which is pretty effective. A bunch of Pax coyotes show up from her yell, and Rudeus uses them to blow off some steam. And soon enough, after Eris's extremely loud yelling, Rudeus turns up. and both Rudeus and Rudeus apologize to each other, and the next day, Rudeus goes bald. Rudeus thinks that it must have taken a lot of guts to do that, since at least in Japan, shaving yourself bald was a way of expressing single-minded determination, or showing remorse for a huge mistake. Seeing Rudeus like that, Rudeus feels like that he should follow his example and asks Eris if he should do it as well, but she says, absolutely not. I like your hair the way that it is. Where both the anime and manga skip this section in like a montage kind of way, we get a lot of detail about the rest of Dead End's journey as they travel through the Demon Continent to get to Westport. Until we find out that there are about 30 people referred to as Demon Kings. They had land but weren't exactly rulers. But just due to their power, they kind of just called themselves king and acted like they ruled the neighborhood. Demon Kings do, however, have knights that come to their aid, and the knights in Rikurisu are actually technically servants of a Demon King. However, these knights are more of like a police force rather than a militaristic army. At the moment, there weren't any wars taking place, so things were pretty peaceful as a lawless land can be anyway, but once you were near a city or an area run by a Demon King, things were pretty tame for the most part. Things are mostly calm between the Southern Cross and the Holy Emperor's Mausoleum, but everything in between is like a Wild West. And to be honest, I have no idea where those places are, but I would assume that the Southern Cross is south, I guess. And the Emperor's Mausoleum might be like here or something. But anyway, the Demon King that rules Rikurisu is a Demon King called Batagati. He is a muscular guy with 6 arms and onyx black skin. At the moment, however, Batagati had set off on an aimless journey, and so no one really knows where he's at the moment. But the Demon Continent itself is very dangerous, with any monster slaying job being C rank or higher, whereas in the Central Continent, most are available at F rank. However, most people in the Demon Continent were generally stronger than many others in like other continents, just due to them being demons and their harsh living conditions. And so 3 days pass ever since they left Rikurisu City. So after having more great tortoise meat, Rudy started to experiment with it by boiling it, and he attempted to pressure cook it, but instead he accidentally made a bomb. And he thought about smoking it, but decided against it since stone tree and chips probably wouldn't put good flavor into it. However, stewing the meat made it much more edible. Instead of eating nasty, tough meat, he was eating nasty, tender meat. So that's good. But still, something was missing compared to the meat that they ate at the meagered village. And then it hit him. It must have been the plants that they were growing. Initially, he thought that they were just dead plants that they were trying to grow, but rather those were herbs and spices. And so that's why Roxy said that their plants there were bitter and unpleasant. They were used for seasoning, not eating. What a goddess to worship, right? But plants are expensive, especially compared to meat, because you could feed an entire village with just one dead black tortoise. However, not everybody ate that. Some people ate pax coyotes, or even the larvae of insects that lived inside of treants, but no matter how brave Eris was, there's no way that she would eat that. However, the decision of buying spices would be his choice, and since Eris and Rudeus are both fine eating the meat the way that it is, that gave him the idea of doing regular group meetings. Eris goes, wait, are we doing the same thing that you did every month with the teachers? And Rudeus goes, yeah, but this is like a party adventurer version though. And with that, Eris kind of just shut her mouth and plopped down in front of Rudeus with a thump. And she just seemed very excited, but she was clearly trying to be serious, but there was like an uncontrolled grin on her face. So I guess she kind of felt very mature in this moment that she was finally able to participate in meetings with that are normally for adults. But Rudeus asks if he has to participate as well, and Rudeus says, well, yeah, obviously. Didn't you have meetings like this back with your warriors? But Rudeus says no. He alone made all of the decisions. And I guess that's just how things work in this world. I mean, it's similar to with like the family situations, right? The man is like the head of the household and kind of like he is the final say. And so it's the same thing with warriors too, I suppose. But after failing like Ninja to try and see some movement, Rudeus tries to get Rudeus and Eris to start clapping for their first meeting, but they just don't. And so awkwardly moving past that, Rudeus apologizes for his failure the other day, and Rudeus says that it wasn't his fault. But then he's cut off by Rudeus, who says, quiet, please. If you have something you want to say, raise your hand after the current speaker finishes. And so he's trying to act like an uptight teacher about this right now. Rudeus says that they need to think and act like a team. If any of them have ideas on what they should do at any given time, they should speak up. But Eris, however, questions why they should do that, since Rudeus will have the final say anyway. So he should just make all the decisions himself. But then Rudeus retorts and says, hey, there's a limit to my genius, you know. But Eris is like, well, it's not like I could come up with any good ideas, especially not compared to you. And that's kind of cute, but also very concerning that she's thinking that way. It's all foreshadowing. However, Eris immediately has an idea that Rudeus doesn't think up of, and that is comparing the prices of shops, which Rudeus failed to do in Rikarisu. But in terms of traveling to Asura, Rudeus asks Rudeus how they can reach the Millis continent. There were 2 routes. One is to travel north and go through the Heaven continent, in which only about 1 in every 20 adventurers survive due to the extreme conditions. The continent is basically just one giant mountain with its land raised far higher than any other continent in the world. And after that, they'd have to go through the harsh winters of the northern central continent and pass through the Red Dragon Range. Not only is this path dangerous, but because of the extreme conditions, it would probably take just as long as if you were to take the long route south. And then on the other hand, speaking of the southern route, Millis is the best route to go about it. They'd go through the Windport and make their way down there. It would take them about 6 months to do without stop. And according to Rudeus, teleportation has been forbidden since the Second Great Human-Demon War. Some teleportation magic circles may still be intact, but using them would be difficult. But Rudeus then asks when the next large town is, and Rudeus says that they should make it in about 2 weeks' time, give or take. And according to Rudeus, in the olden days, the demon subraces created their own small villages, like the Meagred village, and large cities developed as central trading posts, information exchanges, and just for general mingling purposes. So anytime you'd come across a large city, you'd almost always find an adventurer's guild. Before the guild's existence, cities were protected by warriors that represent each of the various races in the area. And sometimes a powerful race would dispatch additional fighters for a race that rarely fought. This was the Superds and Meagred's relationship back in the day. The Meagreds weren't much of fighters, but obviously the Superds were, and so the Superds would help them out. And marriages between different peoples were also a common way to strengthen the bond between villages, and that's why there are so many different kinds of demons. It's just a lot of mixed breeding all around. And after about 2 weeks, they made it to the next city without any issue from Rudeus' identity as a Superd. Possibly because they were dressed as adventurers, Rudeus says that he's never been given such a warm welcome, as he wears kind of a wholesome smile. But soon after they arrived at the inn, they had another team meeting where Eris says that Rudeus sniffed her underwear while he was doing the laundry and wants him to stop. And so from there, Rudeus was kind of forbidden from doing laundry at all, meaning that Rudeus would take responsibility. However, Eris says that she doesn't trust a man who pats every child he sees on the head, and so from there, Rudeus taught Eris how to do the laundry herself. And so that became one of her main responsibilities moving forward. However, he soon caught her sniffing his underwear, so he obviously didn't object to that, but that's interesting. It's fucking disgusting. But now after about 2 months from jumping from city to city, eventually Eris decided that one day that she wanted to learn the demon god tongue. And although she hated doing it, she found that it would be necessary given the situation. After Eris was barely able to even pronounce her own name in the demon god tongue, Rudeus still praised her anyway and said that she was great. And he then recounted a quote from Yamamoto Isoroku, a Japanese Navy admiral in the 1900s. The quote is this: "Show them. Tell them, have them do it, and then praise them. Otherwise, people won't do anything. Speak to them, hear them out, recognize them, and give them responsibility. Otherwise, they will never grow. Watch them work with gratitude and show your faith in them. Otherwise, they will never truly blossom." And so I kind of just wanted to include that quote because I thought that it was pretty cool. But after that, we hear about Eris and Rudeus' training sessions. Now, with this being the 4th teacher that we've seen, the previous ones being Paul, Ghislaine, and Edna, and soon more will come, I think that at some point it would be interesting to make a video talking about all the teachers. Because there is every teacher in the series, I mean, Rudeus included. Rudeus is also another teacher. They all have very different teaching styles. And I think it would be interesting to go over. But Rudeus' training style was basically that he'll exchange blows with you until you are kind of just laid out on the ground with the tip of a spear at your neck. He then asks, "Do you understand?" But the answer is no. Rudeus didn't, but Eris somehow did. The reason why this training style is effective is because it's difficult to say like exactly what you did right or wrong when it comes to battle, and it's much easier to show you physically. So kind of just going through the same routine over and over again, showing like physically showing how you messed up, that's a much more effective way than just saying, oh no, you moved your foot to the left here instead of moving it to the right, right? But showing that in practice to see the actual like issues and like what goes wrong if you were to do that. But Rudeus says that after all this training, Eris is probably stronger than Paul now. Meanwhile, Rudeus himself hasn't really improved at all, and he even goes on to say that Eris could probably beat him even if he used magic. And after a while, Rudeus challenged Rudeus, and no matter what he did, he lost. But Rudeus still praised him and said that he was a well-rounded magician. What did I just say? And it's very similar to what Ghislaine said. But the problem is, Rudeus says that Rudeus has no need to beat him in close combat. He doesn't have much experience with magicians, but he does know that the dragon folk are proficient at using magic in close range combat. Perugius, for example, was capable of summoning a front worm gate and a rear worm gate, and attacked using magic claws. The front worm gate absorbed his opponent's mana, while the rear worm gate gave it to him. It's as Hitogami said, Perugius is very skilled at summoning magic after all. Rudeus kind of thinks that it's a little scummy to like, or cheap to use your opponent's mana and absorb it, but Rudeus kind of like, is it? I don't see anything wrong with it. But one day after training, a man came up to Rudeus and asked him for a duel, in which Rudeus kind of just swept the floor with him. And afterwards, Rudeus gave him his name and the man freaked out. With excitement. He actually fought Rudeus a supered. He acted as though he meant like a famous actor or celebrity or something. And this kind of interaction happened time to time the further south they went. People would find out that he's a super and there wouldn't be much negative reaction. Mostly from warriors, mind you. There'd be late nights where Rudeus goes on to describe details of the war and his past as listeners woed in awe. However, there were still many times that they got chased out of town, but none ever as violent as Rigorisu. Most of it was kind of just the guards going like, hey, sorry, people are a little nervous with a super walking around, so like, could you just get out of here? That'd be fantastic, thanks. And so from there, the months went by and nearly an entire year has passed, and now they finally made it to their destination, Windport. And so now we should be in like the spring or summer-ish of K418, I believe. And as I mentioned before, this journey kind of matches up perfectly with Roxy's journey. So again, it just shows how much detail the author puts into this thing, because she's also at Windport at the same time as Rudeus is. However, something that's a little strange is, I noticed that back when they got their adventurer cards, it stated that Rudeus was 10 and Eris was 12. But that wouldn't exactly be possible because Rudeus has an early birthday and Eris presumably has a late birthday, right? With Rudeus, I think, being in like April and Eris being in like October-ish. So that doesn't exactly make sense, though, just based on the months. At the moment, Rudeus should be 10 and Eris should be 11 if this is the case. They should only have a full 1 year gap when it's like December to March, basically. I don't know if I'm correct on the birthday thing. And so, yeah, I definitely need to make a video talking about the birthdays and the timeline just to get everything perfectly correct. But I don't know. I'm just going to assume that the birthday rounded up, I guess. I don't know. For now, we're just going to assume that it's a little error because they should only, at this point, right, if it's like summer of K4, like whatever, they should be 1 year apart, right, number wise, right? He should be like 10 or 11 and she should be only 11. There shouldn't be a 2 year gap. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares about this. I'm the only one who does. But the point is, birthdays are a little weird. And now, if you didn't look at the, the timeline at the bottom of the video, you might assume that the video is over because we've already gone over everything that the anime manga has covered. But you're wrong. However, there is a short story that we are going to go through today, and you can say that it's almost like a tease for season 2. So if you want to go in as blind as possible, I guess don't listen to this part. But at the same time, it's not going to spoil anything. This will probably be like episode 1 stuff of season 2. However, the short story is called So this is almost like a tease for what's coming up in season 2, and so it kind of just allows us to meet a couple characters, which if you want to go into season 2 completely blind, just I guess skip this, but it's not really going to give us spoilers. We're just going to be introduced to Ariel, Luke, and Fitz, basically. But we start off with Ars, the capital of the Kingdom of Asura. It was the largest and most populated city in the world, and at its center stood a beaming white castle. Naturally, it was the world's largest and most beautiful castle, and it was known simply as the Silver Palace. This is where the royal family resides. However, contrary to its pristine appearance, inside the walls raged a vicious power struggle among the nobles. Day and night they schemed, deceived, and betrayed one another. It's the place where no one can be trusted. The Fidoa region's teleportation incident had a major impact on the course of the wars within the castle. This is the story of how those events were put into motion. Among the many residents of the Silver Palace contained, it also had many beautiful gardens. The Rose Garden, full of red flowers. The Peony Garden, full of black flowers. The Hydragna Garden, full of blue flowers. And the Lily Garden, full of white flowers. This last garden was a favorite for Ariel Anemoy Asura, the second princess of Asura. From her mother, the queen consort, she had inherited features from her shining golden hair to her perfectly smooth skin, and from her father, the king, she had a beautiful voice and an overwhelming charisma. Despite not even being of age yet, the capital's residents already describe her as the most beautiful princess to have ever lived. Once every 3 days, Ariel would sit alone at a pure white table, drinking her tea accompanied by her guardian knight and mage. Her guardian knight was quite a handsome boy, had lovely chestnut hair and sharp facial features. He was Luke Notos Greyrat, the second son of the Greyrat family, reigning him from one of the 4 major families. Despite only being in his early teens, he was an intermediate rank in the sword god style. There wasn't a single girl who didn't know of him and didn't fall for him. Ariel's guardian mage was around his late teens, maybe 16 or 17. Although he's not as good looking as Luke, he was also quite handsome as well. His slender face had a certain attractiveness to it and gave off a bit of a playful charm that complemented the beauty for all 3 of them. His name was Derrick Redbat, the 3rd son of the Redbat house. He was an advanced rank magician who graduated from the Asura Institute of Magic. Now just what did these 3 beautiful people talk about, people wondered. Well, here's a drop in on their current conversation. Well, what color were they? Ariel asked. Oh, they were a lovely shade of pink with a tinge of orange, replied Luke. Personally, I prefer pert cherry blossom buds with a field of porcelain white. Well, with all due respect, Lady Ariel, but I feel like the ones that turn inward have a certain charm to them as well. Goodness, you love inverted ones. Well, I'm not too picky on the details, just so long as they're big. Ariel sighed and says that Luke has no taste at all, and in response he simply shrugged his shoulders. Ariel continues the conversation and asks, well, in any case, how did you like the new maid? Sarisha, is it? And so I'm going to stop talking about the conversation because, look, I know it's juicy. It's a wonderful topic that they're discussing, but I don't want to get demonetized. But to sum things up without going into excessive detail, because surprisingly, this is relevant to their characters. Basically, Luke is a womanizer like any other Greyrat, while Ariel is a bisexual sadistic princess who charms anyone she comes across. She sounds lovely, and they are both massive perverts, although Ariel is more so than Luke, if you can believe that. But this wasn't really exclusive to just them. Many people in the Asuran nobility had a large libido and sexual drive. Much like the palace itself, her perfect outward appearance was a polar opposite to what she was like on the inside. Although not many people, even inside the palace, know that. However, someone who certainly wasn't like them was Derrick. He had a more conventional mindset, to put it that way. He tells Ariel and Luke that they should keep discussions like that a bit quiet, and comparing people in the palace could make themselves enemies. Ariel sighs and she says, look, I'm the second princess. I have nothing to worry about. Don't worry, I'm not even in the running for anything. Nobody's going to be after me. I'm free to just chill. But Derrick retorts and says that being the second princess is still very high in the line of succession. And although she does have 2 older brothers and an older sister, Ariel is the only child of the queen consort, which makes her the only fully legitimate heir to their throne. But then Ariel cuts him off, saying that even if she were to fight, the age gap between her and her siblings, it would just be a hellish fight, and she'd rather just spend her time sipping tea, not caring about the world and such topics like that. Derrick kind of just sighed and walked away, and it's not like he was abandoning his post or anything, but he simply had to go to the bathroom. At first, he'd always announce when he had to go, because when one is relieving themselves, that's when they're most vulnerable. But Ariel kind of just got annoyed anytime she was having tea. This guy is going like, hey yo, Ariel, I gotta piss, so like, I'll be right back. And so she kind of just forced him to stop announcing it. But Ariel thinks that Derrick wants her to get caught up in the power struggle only to abandon her when the fight starts. In reality, that is not at all where he's coming from. Sure, her siblings can run the country just fine, but they wouldn't make any positive change. It would continue its course staying rotten to its core. The problem with Asura is that there's never been any major issues that it's faced. No hunger or anything, really, which means few to step up and challenge its status quo. And this resulted the kingdom being stagnated. Sure, it's doing alright in terms of magic and technology, but the King Dragon realm in the south has taken over in the technological departments, and the magic nations to the north has greater strides in magical research. And it's said that in 100 years, or maybe even 50, it's hard to say if the Asura kingdom will be nearly as strong as it is now. The King Dragon realm was watching Asura for any signs of weakness, and once it does, it'll strike. At the moment, the mountains were protecting Asura from harm, but could it stay that way with the advancement of technology and magic? Derrick truly believes that Ariel could be the one to guide Asura kingdom to a better future, and possibly even take over the entire central continent. So it was heartbreaking for her to dismiss his loyalty. He remembers the first time that he met her clearly. Just a few years earlier at a coming-of-age celebration, Derrick had just graduated from the Asura Institute of Magic. Although he wasn't a top student, he was still pretty good. However, he knew that despite being a capable magician, he would never make it like extremely far. However, that day he met a charming young girl, and despite not being of age yet, she was still invited to the party and delivered a congratulatory speech. It was then he could see how smart and charismatic this girl is. Sometime after, he joined the Royal Magicians and soon found out that thanks to his father, that a position for Ariel's guardian mage was vacant and he was recommended the job. There were many people that spoke poorly of the government and other nobility, but none spoke anything bad about Ariel. He thinks that she could be a ruler like Goddess Free in Asura, the previous ruler of Asura who led humankind through the latter stages of the Laplace War. She was beloved by all. Derrick worries that she's going to one day become like all the other nobles. And just as he thought all this, however, he overheard some people saying something like Ariel and kill. Listening closer to the voices outside of the lavatory, he hears that Prince Grable, the first prince and Eris' eldest brother, views her as a threat. Despite her rarely showing her face in public, she's far more known than he is, and according to one of the men, they've already made certain arrangements. Derrick was ready to kill the men on the spot, but it could have been seen as an attack against Grable, which would end up with Ariel's life on the line. So that's like a no-go. And as Derrick heads back to Ariel, he's ready to talk to her about what's happening. And despite never being in a serious fight before, he is ready to do whatever it takes to protect Ariel from any dangers. However, just then, the Fidoa teleportation incident was happening at that very moment. As Derrick was returning, he noticed towards the back of the garden known as the Hibiscus Forest, an enormous Terminator boar stood there, ready to charge. For the reminder, these are those giant boars with like the extra 2 arms coming out of its shoulders, and them on their own were D-ranked monsters, but often are accompanied by assault dogs, which raises the threat to C or even B. They're often found in forests, but many years ago a Terminator boar with 20 assault dogs had killed an entire Asuran village, and as a result, they are one of the most terrifying monsters within the Asuran borders. Derrick questions why one is here of all places though. Could it have been the arrangements that he overheard earlier? However, in reality, it was the Fidoa teleportation incident which moved the monster there, which, by the way, I guess, don't know if it's ever been stated, but I guess that means that the monsters were also teleported as well, so that's kind of scary. But Derrick attempts to recite an incantation as the boar charges towards him with Ariel in between, but then he kind of just gives up and yells at Ariel to get out of the way. As she hears him, she gets up and dodges the attack, and Derrick moves in between Ariel and the boar. However, just a moment later, one of its giant fists swung and sent him flying. And it kind of just broke all of his ribs, and Ariel ran over to him with tears in her eyes, and Derrick realizes that Ariel never actually hated him like he once thought, which is nice, I suppose, but in his final words he says that he never abandoned her like she said that he would, and that he would like for her to take the throne and lead Asura to become a better country. He coughed up blood, nearing his final breath. Luke, barely managing to survive against this thing, is knocked to the ground. And Ariel stood up and glared at the creature before shouting at it, "I don't know where you came from or why you stood before the future Queen of Asura, but I'm not going to die today. Be gone." And just as Ariel says this, Derrick gives a silent prayer to Milis, although he knows that Saint Milis doesn't just give a miracle anytime you ask for one. But then, a miracle came. With an ear-splitting scream, an angel fell from the heavens in the form of a young white-haired angel, and with a war cry, the angel stretched their hands out as the boar's upper half was just blown apart. The Fedoa displacement incident costed one young magician his life, and provided Ariel Asura with a new and different purpose. What path did she follow in the aftermath of these events? How did they change Luke Greyrat? And what became of the angel that fell from the heavens? These are tales from another time on Dragon Ball Z. And so that was the light novel. That is episode 11. That's the end of volume 3, probably the end of volume 5. That was a hell of a half of a season, wasn't it? However, there's still 13 more episodes to cover, so this one added quite a bit of information, I'll say that, and a few extra side stories and whatnot, so that was fun. But anyway, I guess, what did you think about the changes? What do you think about what the anime skipped, basically? And if you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe for more Mushoku Tensei content, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.